Though it's always been an issue, there's been a lot of discussions about racial tensions that have recently come up. You see in the news all the time, whether it's conversations about incarceration statistics or police brutality, or it has something to do with immigration. The discussion about race is pervasive. So this brings up a question for us in the church is this a gospel issue? And what we've seen a lot lately, there are several camps. One thinks it's not an issue at all, that this is something that has nothing to do with the gospel, that we've resolved everything we have to when it comes to race, like it's not even a problem anymore. Another group of people thinks it is a problem, it absolutely needs to be addressed, but it really distracts from the main work of the church, that it distracts from the gospel work that we're supposed to be about, that we should really just focus on other things and not about racial issues. But what if focusing on racial issues is a gospel issue? What if that's exactly what the church should be doing? Okay, let's start from the beginning. Have you heard it said that we are created in the image of God? That comes all the way from the beginning of the Bible, from Genesis chapter 1, where it talks about mankind, meaning both men and women are created in the image of God, which means a couple of things. It means, one, that all men and all women are God's representatives on this planet, that He has put us in a position of authority to be His representatives, and then two, that every man and woman, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or what they have to offer, has inherent value because God made them with inherent human dignity.
This idea, the Imago Dei, is the basis for human dignity and rights. If we were made in God's image, then any attack on the value or worth of another human is an affront to God Himself, and indignity He will not tolerate.
God is a God of justice. We're reminded of one of many verses in the Bible, James 3:9, that talks about the human's capacity to both bless with their tongue and curse with their tongue those who are made in God's likeness. And God takes very seriously offenses towards people because they bear His image.
So let's keep going. From creation to Revelation, we see that God is reconciling and redeeming all things back to Himself. Not only is humanity reconciled back to God, which is certainly one of the major themes of the Bible, but we're also reconciled one to another and to each other. You could say that the story of the Bible is a story about reconciliation.
God's history of interaction with mankind has been these covenants. And since the beginning, we've seen that God's kingdom is multi-ethnic and multicultural, from the covenant He makes with Abraham, where He tells him that all the nations of the world will be blessed through the descendants of this one man. And we see that continue in the covenant that God makes with Moses, where we see the people of Israel start to really form around the commands of God and see how they become a blessing to the nations around them. And we see that continue as God makes His covenant with David. David to be a blessing to those around him, to be the king, the shepherd king, on which we will see a type of Messiah. And so in the new covenant, we see the fulfillment of all that in Jesus Christ. And in His new covenant, in His life, death, and resurrection, the Messiah didn't come just to save the Jews, but to save also the Gentiles, where people of every tongue, tribe, and nation are worshiping God together.
In Joel chapter 2, God says, I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, not just one flesh, not just one ethnicity, not just one nation, but all nations.
Then we see His hope and plan for His creation accomplished in Revelation 7:9. When John looks and he beholds a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation and tribe and tongue, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands.
So racial harmony is far from being a secondary issue or a throwaway issue or something we can focus on later. It is absolutely central to the gospel. If this vision in Revelation is true, the hope of the kingdom is that we would have a kaleidoscopic group of people where skin tone or skin hue or ethnicity is not something to be minimized, but rather celebrated, because the Lord is Lord over all people in all places and all times. And that is the kingdom that you and I are a part of.
Okay, we're starting to wrap up, but let's look at one more thing, and this is a really crucial aspect that really brings a clear picture of what we're talking about, and that is the temple. And in the temple that God had told man to build, there were different separations because of the separation between man and God. There were separations because of sin that God had instituted within the temple grounds. To communicate to people, there's a barrier between you that needs to be addressed.
Over the course of time, there wasn't just a distinction between holiness and uncleanliness, but also ethnicity distinction, where some people, based upon their ethnicity, were allowed closer into the presence of God, and others were removed further away from the presence of God. But what we see in the New Testament is that God tears down this dividing wall of hostility. The temple curtain is ripped in two so that all peoples might experience the presence of God.
And now that Christ has addressed the division between man and God, he also addresses the divisions between people, between man and man.
The Great Commission calls us to go, to make disciples of every tribe, tongue, and nation, to participate in God's plan for the redemption of the whole world, to take action that demonstrates that Christ has torn down in his flesh this wall between our brothers and sisters, does not forsake the gospel, it furthers it.
Like James says, faith without works is dead. And so what Christ is calling us to is not just a belief system. It's not just a set of tenets that we agree are true. It's an action. And the action of the church is to address the things that break the heart of God. And division between mankind is not his way. And so what we get to be as the church is those who reconcile not only people to their Creator, but people to one another. It's the ministry of reconciliation that we've been called to.